are talking The Kindred, directed by Jamie Patterson and stars April Pearson as Helen, who was our main character. Got some recognisable supporting cast here as well. Most notably for me was Blake Harrison, who you know from Neil from The In-Betweeners here as Helen's husband. You've also got Patrick Bergin and James Cosmo show up as well. Now this is kind of less of a horror film, more of a thriller drama with supernatural elements, although I will kind of banner it under a horror movie. It's, you know, there's not much an actual that's going to scare you necessarily here, or it doesn't really play like a horror film, as I say. It plays more like a mystery more than anything else, I suppose. Now we have a kind of a prologue of the movie where we see our main character Helen get hit by a car after she witnesses her father commit suicide. And there's something that's gone on there, but she's kind of got amnesia, and we catch up with her a year later where she's been in a coma and she can't really remember what happened. And in that time we learn that she's actually had a baby. So now she's kind of trying to piece her life together, and you know, her husband has kind of fallen on hard times within that year, and they've had to move into the apartment where her father lived and committed suicide. But while she is there, she's visited by strange spirits and weird occurrences that may have something to do with her history. What'll happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So first of all, let's talk about what I think works with The Kindred. Okay. So, as I've mentioned, this is not really a horror film, so if you are expecting jump scares, gore, kills, things like that, this is not going to be this type of movie. It is more of a slower burn, drama-based movie with some, you know, some kind of like supernatural elements for sure, but they are more subdued. But I have to say, I do think this movie has an interesting kind of mystery involved in what's actually kind of gone on. I was quite intrigued to kind of see where the story was going to take us, and kind of how these kind of characters are kind of interacting. We are actually, I have kind of mixed feelings about this next bit, but we're introduced to quite a large supporting cast, as I've mentioned, James Cosmo, Patrick Bergin, a few other kind of characters as well, that I feel is kind of meant to give us, you know, lots of kind of characters who may or may not have something to kind of do with what's kind of gone on, to kind of muddy the waters somewhat. But you know, I have mixed feelings about that, but we'll come on to it. But I like the fact that it's obviously trying to have this kind of like this weaving kind of mystery, and as you obviously the film goes on, you kind of learn more about it. I think the acting is all pretty good. It's kind of weird to see Blake Harrison in a non-kind of comedic role as the kind of the father, although he doesn't have a huge amount of screen time here. But for the most part, I think the acting here was all kind of pretty solid. It is a low-budget movie, but I actually thought the what effects we do see worked reasonably well for a kind of a low budget. Again, I have kind of a few issues, but I think they look kind of creepy, and it does a good job of having some mildly disturbing images. There's one, I think, that stand out for me was where Helen, our character, hears a banging at the door, and you just see this kind of a little girl kind of headbutting or the silhouette of a little girl kind of headbutting through the glass window. I thought that was a particularly kind of like quite kind of creepy moment. The actual kind of on a technical side of it, I think this is a proficiently kind of made movie. The director has got a reasonable kind of filmography behind him, and has worked with the kind of the main actress before, I believe. So everyone here, I think, is kind of working very proficiently, and it looks good on a kind of a cinematic kind of level, albeit again this is a kind of a low budget movie. I like the fact that this movie takes place in this kind of like this high rise, and that itself kind of looks kind of quite kind of daunting and kind of dangerous at times. And you'll be reminded, of other movies that kind of take place within a kind of a tower block and things like that we've seen kind of in the past, science fiction and kind of horror films. So that kind of transitions into what I think maybe doesn't work. This movie will be too slow for some. It's just going to be, and I think a movie like this, which is positioning itself like a horror film, will ultimately disappoint people who want more of a genuine kind of scare face, because this movie is quite light on the actual scares. And in regards to the actual kind of when we do see stuff on screen, I liked it for the most part, although albeit there's kind of, I think they maybe over-designed slightly some of the kind of the the ghostly images to a certain degree. Again, I'm not going to kind of spoil anything for you, but yeah, they look a little bit kind of over-designed at times. That's all I'll kind of say. And this movie does do some typical things that I feel a lot of ghost movies do. You know, for example, we'll have an image of a ghostly figure kind of standing behind our main protagonist, who is kind of looking forward in the camera. When they turn around, there's no one there, and it's like, well, who's that ghost appearing for? You know, if it's not appearing for the person in the film, who is it appearing for? And then when it turns around, it's like invisible. It never makes sense to me, that kind of trope. But then, you know, we do kind of have interactions as the film kind of goes on, and Helen are kind of our main character. Someone gets used to seeing these things to a certain degree. It does have quite a lot of characters, as I've mentioned, and some of these characters seem to have very little to do. They're kind of introduced, and I feel that they are introduced only to give us a cast of larger cast. So we think, who may be responsible for what's kind of going on here, and kind of give us some kind of false lead. It just seems that they introduce a lot of characters, and I'm going to say who is obviously a red herring necessarily, but it seems kind of unnecessary. The biggest gripe I have with this film is I do think the third act is a little contrived, and doesn't make a huge amount of sense in regards to character motivations when things are revealed. It's reasonably obvious, I think, what's kind of going on, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense when you think of why would people do certain things. Again, having to be vague because I don't want to spoil the movie for you, but you know, it's a relatively intelligent script, I feel, and characters, for the most part, I think act quite intelligently. And there are some elements here at the very, very end, again, I'm not going to spoil it for you, where I feel the characters were dealt with in a immature and realistic manner about what would ultimately be their fates. But I have to say, kind of, the actual sort of climax of the third act, the kind of ultimately when all is revealed, didn't really work for me. I felt like that kind of wasn't particularly kind of thought through, and had some ultimately some plot holes in it. And as I've mentioned, this movie won't just be, it could have maybe amped up the creepy factor a little bit, I feel. It doesn't do a good enough job of really making a sense of fear and dread. It looks relatively kind of light in regards to any horror elements, which I feel may displease people looking for a genuine kind of horror film. And as I say, it feels more like a police procedural more than anything else. But it's not a bad movie. I would certainly say it is worth a watch if you like a slow burn supernatural mystery. I'll give this one a 5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.